Today is Thursday, Parashat Vayera, and we're learning the Halakha from Hok Leisrael. The Halakha today speaks about 5 things that would be very hard to repent from because people consider them to be unimportant, to be trivial. And therefore, since typically people consider this as not being sins of any importance, a person deludes himself into thinking that there is nothing wrong that is done, and therefore he's not motivated to repent. And these are the 5 things. Number 1, האוכל מסעודה שאינה מספקת לבעליה. A person who eats from a meal that is insufficient for his hosts. And he thinks to himself, well, they invited me, I'm eating with their permission. But he's not sensitive enough to realize that poor couple who invited him, that poor family who invited him, barely has enough for themselves. And he's not careful to be sensitive enough to avoid either being their guest or to eat minimally so that he will leave enough for his hosts. And such a person will have a hard time to do teshuvah, to repent, because he thinks, I was their guest, they invited me. Second thing, המשתמש באבותו של עני, שאבות של עני אינו אלא כגון קרדום ומחרשה, ואומר בליבו אינם חסרים והרי לא גזלתי אותו. So the second situation is if a person took a collateral for a loan that he gave to someone. So he gave a loan to a poor person, and he took a collateral from him. Let's say he took a shovel as a collateral because a poor person doesn't have much to give. He, according to Halakha, is not allowed to use that collateral. It's there just as a security against the loan. And if he uses it, he's transgressed one of the mitzvot of the Torah. And such a thing, person considers to be trivial and unimportant, and he will not repent from it. It's typically people will not repent from such action they consider to be unimportant. Third thing, hamistakel ba'arayot, ומעלה על דעתו שאין בכך כלום, שהוא אומר וחיבלתי או קרבתי אצלה. Third thing is a person who gazes at women who are forbidden to him. And a person deludes himself in saying, I've done nothing wrong. I didn't touch her. I didn't have relations with her. I didn't come close to her. I just looked. Well, looking and gazing and observing. And here it says, Re'iyat Ainayim Avon Gadol. The seeing with the eyes is also a sin. It's a great sin. And a person can sometimes delude himself into thinking, I've done nothing, I just looked. Well, if you happen just to look by chance, it's one thing. But if a person continues to gaze and observe, that's also a sin. And people have a hard time sometimes realizing that it's a sin and to do teshuvah from it. The fourth thing, המיתכבד בקלון חברו, a person who acquires honor through putting down another person, not in front of him. He's not embarrassing a person in public, but he puts himself on a pedestal and shows that his actions are so much better than this other person. So he puts the other person down, comparing him to himself. So he's having a conversation with another person. He says, Mr. John Doe, he doesn't know how to do things. I can do much better than him. This is how I do, and this is what I do, but he doesn't do this and that. In other words, he's putting himself up in relationship to another person, even if he's not doing it in front of him and embarrassing him in public. It's still considered to be a sin, and it's hard to repent from this because people consider this as being not such a grave sin or not a sin at all. It is, and a person should do teshuvah from this too. And the fifth and final thing here is a choshed biksherim, a person who suspects the innocent. And when you suspect somebody who's innocent, it is a sin, even though you can think, well, I didn't say it's his fault, I just suspected him, that's all. Being suspicious of others, when that person is actually a person who's innocent, a person who's decent, and you suspect him of things that he didn't do, that's considered to be a sin. And the person who suspects the others who are innocent, who are decent, puts himself at risk. החושד בכשרים לוקה בגופו, which means a person who suspects the innocent, actually he himself can be punished for that suspicion. So something like this is also something to do teshuvah from, even though many people would consider that to be a trivial type of situation. A person should do teshuvah from this and should be very careful not to suspect the innocent and to give people the benefit of the doubt. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen.